I am Mark Silver. I'm a photographer and author in Carmel, California, and welcome to Advancing Your Photography. And today's episode is brought to us by Bay Photo, our friends at Bay Photo. I've been working with them for years. They make prints, they make books, they make cards, they give you awesome customer service. Please take advantage of them, support them, and support yourself. And they're going to give you a 25% discount on your first order. So listen, you got to make prints. It's super important, and they're going to help you do that. Okay, now our guest today, getting my camera set there, is an old friend, Deanne Fitzmaurice. She's been on the show before many years ago. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning editorial and commercial photographer in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she's most known for her unique ability to go behind the scenes to discover and convey personal and emotional stories through her images. We're going to talk to her about that very specifically. She's a Nikon ambassador and an assignment photographer with publications including Sports Illustrated, ESPN, National Geographic, and many others. And Deanne, it is so great to have you back with us on Advancing Your Photography.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here, Mark. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. And we're talking about our favorite subject, photography, and specifically how you use your tools to create those emotional images. So what are some of the key things that you use every time you pick up a camera or before you even pick one up?
A lot of my work is based on building relationships, making a human connection, building trust. So that's kind of the backbone to my photography. That's really what it is that I try to establish, to be able to go in deeper, for people to let me into their lives and to be able to capture some of those moments.
Yeah. And we're going to look at those. In fact, why don't we just jump over and we'll talk about some of your photos that do that. And I just picked out some, not randomly, but I thought the ones that would really represent this. And what is the story? We've got two guys on a horse. You seem to be right there with them. They're not paying any attention to you. What's the story behind this photograph?
Yeah, this was in Cuba, Trinidad, Cuba, and This was in November of last year. I was there. I was leading a workshop for Summit Workshops, and it was beautiful evening, light. You know, everything in Cuba is colorful, and
it is.
It's just so vibrant. And, we just love to go out into the streets and photograph and just wander and really doing street photography. So no real plan, just letting things unfold.
Right. Somebody brought this question up. I'm going to just ask you. So the difference between street photography, documentary, and photojournalism. I know there's an overlap in all three, but how do you distinguish those three?
Wow. There's a lot of crossover with those three terms. So, and they are interchangeable, I think. What I would say is documentary tends to lend itself towards a long-term project.
Right.
Form storytelling. So something that you work on for an extended period of time, whatever that is, whether it's a month, 6 months, a year, years. Photojournalism, I think more of the craft of going out, doing assignments, newspapers, magazines. There's a strong journalistic set of ethics that you follow in capturing the moments for authenticity and for credibility.
Right.
Street photography, for me, is just, going out wandering on the streets without really an assignment and without a real purpose to the work.
Yeah.
To go out and let things unfold. Really, capturing the essence of the place where you are. You can be doing this as a travel photographer, or, just someone who's interested in elevating their craft of photography and getting comfortable being able to photograph people on the streets. And there's always that tricky thing of, do I ask them before I photograph them?
Right.
Do I photograph them and risk they might not like the fact that I photographed them? So there's this little dance that you do.
And with these guys, I'm assuming you probably didn't approach them, right? You were just standing on the side there and they came by?
Well, a lot of it is really becoming invisible. That's so much what I do. I try to become invisible. So I try to become part of the scene, part of the woodwork. And that happens from spending time. Like I was here on this specific corner for at least an hour.
Wow.
And I was there because these two little boys were playing stickball.
Oh, yeah.
So they had stick, and, usually like a little bottle cap or something that they're playing baseball with on the streets. And so they were having a great time and they were ignoring me. Like at first they were looking at me, they were posing, and then they forgot about me. And I was able to start capturing some moments. And I was kind of timing it. I was looking at what was happening with the light. It was late afternoon, maybe 6, 7 o'clock. And sometimes there would be a great old classic car went by, and kind of juxtaposing the different elements that were happening. And then all of a sudden, like it was out of central casting, these two horses come riding down the street. This first one with the two guys riding bareback, smoking a cigarette. And usually what happens is they see me, I lift up my camera, like instinctively, like, whoa, things are happening here. Lift up my camera and I'm thinking, okay, I want to capture this whole scene, including these two little boys. And they look at me. I think one of them looked at me and the other one was kind of just looking at where he was going.
Yeah.
And then usually I'll just maybe shoot a frame and then just wait, and they usually stop. They usually stop looking at me. Sometimes if they're continually staring at me and I really want to capture more of a natural moment where it doesn't look like the photographer is part of the scene, I want them to forget about me, I might just put my camera down for a minute.
Yeah.
Or just kind of look a different way, and then they're not aware of the camera.
Yes, those are all important techniques to have down, because that art of being invisible is something that Henri Cartier-Bresson perfected. I heard the story. I asked somebody who worked with him, and I thought, many times he might go up and ask permission. He said, absolutely not. He usually got the photograph before anybody even knew he was there. So that definitely is an art.
A little bit more about becoming invisible. And, and that is, I try to travel light. I used to carry a fair amount of equipment with me, maybe 2 bodies. But when I'm out working like this, I try to just have one body with, one lens and then a backup lens in a little pouch, so I try to travel really light, and that helps. You can move around easily and you're not as intimidating looking, as someone who may be carrying a lot of equipment.
Are you shooting now with a Z6 or 7?
Yes, I'm using both those cameras a lot. Those are I would say my main go-to cameras. I use the D5 and the 850 for certain things, but generally when I'm going to go pick up a camera to go shoot, yesterday, the day before, I grabbed the Z7.
And that is a much less intimidating camera than a big DSLR, for sure. So that's a real improvement. Here's our next one in terms of getting close to your subject in an emotionally impactful way. Tell us the story here.
Yeah, this is a story that I started in 2003. This little boy, Salah Khalaf, he came to America for medical treatment. He was living in Iraq and walking home from school one day with his brother, picked up what he thought was a ball, but it turned out to be a bomb. His older brother came to him and tried to get this from his hands, and it blew up. So it killed Salah's older brother, who was 16, and Salah at the time was 9.
Wow.
And he lost fingers on one hand, lost his hand, his right hand. His abdomen was blown open, and he lost an eye. So he came to America for medical treatment, and I started documenting his story. He and his dad came to California for Salah to be treated at Children's Hospital in Oakland. So I just started documenting his story and continued.
Was that on assignment, or was that for your own project?
That was on assignment. I was working as a staff photographer at the San Francisco Chronicle.
Right.
And it was just like an ordinary everyday assignment. I was going out photographing everything, news, sports, entertainment. And this day, my editor came back and said, "Hey, Deanne, there's this little boy that was just brought into Children's Hospital. Can you go out and photograph him for tomorrow's paper?" So I went out with writer Meredith May, went to the hospital, and that's where I started this project. It kind of went from a one-day project to a multi-year project, and I'm
Amazing.
Still in touch and photographing Salah to this day.
How many years ago was that? How old is he now, would you think?
It was 2003. He was 9 years old. He's about 24, 25 now. And I'm in touch with him. He's still in the Bay Area. All of his family's here. And I've been photographing him over the years and just keeping in touch with him.
Now, here's an example. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, which is layering and frames within frames. So maybe you could tell us about both of those in regards to this image.
Yes, this is in Cuba again. And this picture is a good one to look at today because it shows 3 things that we cannot do today in California anyway. We can't get haircuts, we can't get our nails done, and we can't travel to Cuba. This was really street photography, I would say. I was traveling in Cuba with a friend, Kenna Kosterman, and we were just walking down the street, and we see a barber shop, and it looked like it was kind of lively and interesting. So we just walked in, and it was the epitome of Cuba, so full of life. Music, dance. You could see it's a tiny place, but the music was blaring. The barber here, he's just wearing an apron with no shirt under it. He was, he'd do a little bit of a haircut, and then he'd just break into dance. He grabbed my friend Kenna, started dancing with her. It was just a lively, lively scene. So there was a lot going on in a small space, but it really captured the essence of people in Cuba are just so alive. And I felt like this captured that. It was colorful, but the way I love to photograph is to layer, and saying the frame within a frame, where you look at a picture and, over on the right here, that's one photo, and over at the left is another photo. So as I'm looking at things unfolding, I'm always looking for a foreground, and I'm looking for a background, and I'm looking what's in front of the main subject, what's behind the main subject. If I move over here to the left, can I create multiple images within one frame? And to me, what that does is it adds complexity, it adds nuance, it adds storytelling elements. And to me, I think, if you work at it, I always try to build more of a sophisticated composition rather than a one layer composition, just adding some depth.
it gives it so much life and vitality. And, because you feel like it's a two-dimensional photograph, but you feel the three-dimensionalness of it. I mean, it really gives you that sense of depth. And the story comes through, because we can see the woman looking back at you and her expression. And you even have a third frame there with the guy in the mirror who is sitting kind of near where you are, I assume, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I take that as part of my craft of photography, is just looking and looking for building layers. Where can I find another layer?
Right. I am going to give that as an assignment. We have a what's called the AYP Club on Facebook, and Jared can put up the link for it. And I like to give these assignments. I call them photo dojos. And I'm going to give you guys an assignment right now to take a photograph that has multiple frames in it, or multiple layers, because it's really a great exercise in really seeing everything that's going on, and not kind of ignoring it, or even kind of like, oh, I better just take this one aspect of it. I better just photograph this one separately and the other one separately, and they're two different images rather than combining them into one. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because sometimes they can compete with each other in a way that's not good. So I'm always trying to communicate as clearly as I can, but I want the extra layers to add to the composition and not fight with it.
Well, here's a perfect example. What could be a series of things fighting with each other actually works. So this is in Cuba again, right?
Exactly, yes. And, it's a matter of spending time. Like, I see these guys hanging around, it's like a taxi stand, and they've all got these beautiful classic cars. And they're kind of hanging around. There's a lot of activity. So I arrive at this scene, and there's just a lot going on. And I'm thinking, okay, how can I make an interesting composition out of this? And then I'm thinking also about, I can pick up my camera and shoot a frame, or I can work the situation. I can really spend some time. And, that's a thing where, you're doing street photography. Sometimes it's best to be by yourself, because a lot of people don't like to wait unless they're photographing as well. But, thinking about, okay, how can I make this composition more interesting? How can I layer it? So I just start looking at what's in front of me, what's a possible layer. So I start looking through, I start looking at mirrors, and I start looking at reflections and looking through and seeing frames happen. So I start to build it. I'm photographing in through the window, where this car becomes my first layer.
Yeah.
The second layer of this green car going by, that was serendipity. So sometimes there are layers that I consciously compose, like the guys at the right standing in front of the red car. They were consciously part of my composition.
Right.
But the green car was serendipity. So sometimes there's a combination of both. Sometimes, with the cowboys that came through the one of the previous photos we looked at on the Cuba street, that was serendipity. So there's the mirror here, and I'm looking. So here, you've got the two horses that come through, and that created serendipity, layers of storytelling, serendipity. And now I'm also looking up in that mirror, the rear view mirror, what's going on there, and trying to time it as well. Like I see someone come walking up, and I see a car's coming up. So, I start shooting. So it's just kind of a combination of serendipity unfolding. I'm looking and looking and looking, building and working the composition. Many times it doesn't work, but sometimes, luck comes your way, and, things line up nicely.
How many frames do you think you captured before you got this one? Before and after?
If I find something that I like I'll spend some time with it. So I
Yeah.
was probably here shooting this for probably about 30 minutes or so.
Wow.
And just watching as things are unfolding. And again, the guys at the right, at first they were looking at me and they were aware of me. So, I just kind of smiled and waved at them, and then they just stopped looking at me after a while. They kind of forgot about me. Just spending time is the best thing because, again, becoming invisible. So in terms of number of frames, boy, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50 frames.
Okay.
Yeah.
You probably shoot like many of us who came from the film era, which is, you're not just like bursting away all the time, right? I mean, I tend to shoot not quite like I was with film, and I only have 36 exposures, but I don't want to clog up my system with a whole bunch of images that I know won't even work.
Yeah, it's true. And then sometimes you can be intimidating to people. They hear you just firing
Yeah.
away and they, feel a little uncomfortable. Some nice things with the Z6 and the Z7 is I can put them on silent mode
Right.
at times, and that helps. But, it's all about just being inconspicuous and blending in and people not being aware of you, because that's when you get those authentic moments.
So true. Okay. Oh, I have one question here. So you're in the blue car, right? You're in this. Is that the back seat you're in? Yeah.
It's the front.
You're in the front seat. Oh.
I'm actually leaning in the window.
Oh. Okay. Now I get it. So that car was not moving.
No, the one I'm in was parked.
I see. Okay. And then okay, so that's a parked car, and these guys in the green car, obviously, now it makes more sense because when I looked at it, like if that car were moving, it was going to run into the green car. Now I get it.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
So you leaned through the window to get this. That's a really cool tip right there, you guys. I mean, you could have just been intimidated by that idea and just stood outside it, but this has a lot to do with your whole getting in close, for that additional emotional impact by moving in a little closer.
Yeah, I think it's about making people around you comfortable. And, it's possible that I don't know really where the driver of this car was.
Yeah.
But, I looked around and, I was gingerly at first, just kind of shooting around the edges, looking around that if someone had a problem with me being close to this car, they would have had a chance to ask me not to photograph there or to back off. And, I find that just smiling helps a lot. The guys over at the right, I kind of smile and wave. And so then, they just realize, okay, she's just shooting some pictures. She's harmless.
Right. Good point.
So just kind of putting out that energy of it's the most normal thing in the world for me to be leaning in this car shooting this picture right now.
And that comes from just doing it, right? You just got to get in there and do it. Okay, what is the story here? There's been a bad fire.
Yes, and again, I am leaning in the passenger or the driver's side window of this car.
Right.
That was burnt out. Now, these were the massive wildfires that came through California recently.
Yeah.
So I had been traveling. I was in Southern California, and I was there on assignment, but I was, hearing that the fires were just raging through Sonoma and Napa counties. And, that's not too far from us.
Not at all.
Think tank is based in Santa Rosa,
Yeah.
and the fires were blazing through Santa Rosa. We had to evacuate the company, and so as soon as I got back home, I just knew I needed to go there and photograph. And, a lot of my work starts with a personal project. I mean, this really was a personal project. I wasn't being assigned by anyone. Some of my work is magazine assignments. Some of it is working with nonprofits and foundations. Some of it is personal projects. And that's what this was. When something is happening and I just felt drawn to this story, I need to go document this.
And is that something you do a lot where you're just you've got your radar out there to see what's going on and something strikes you and you go off and jump into it?
It is. And, I try to do that more and more all the time, just responding to the things that are tugging at my heart, the things that are calling to me, and just go do them rather than waiting around for an assignment. Sometimes I will go out and shoot something as, say, a personal project, and then I'll pitch an editor and it'll become it'll be published eventually. So, there's a lot of different ways of working, but, I'm trying to stay true to the assignments that are calling to me and the work I want to be doing.
I guess that's the first point of capturing an image that's going to grab people by the heart is first it has to grab you by the heart, right?
That is so true. It's so true. People ask me a lot of times, how do I do meaningful documentary photography, things that will make a difference, that will change the way people think, that will, affect meaningful change, shine a light on issues. And, I say, first of all, you have to care about it because that's the only way that you're going to photograph it in a way that people are going to care about it. You have to be committed to it. You have to go out there. You have to be passionate about it. And, without an assignment, it's like, yeah, I'm going to go there and I'm going to photograph this because I believe it needs to be documented. So just having that passion and that drive to go do something like this, that's what makes people care.
That is a really great piece of advice. And that kind of goes into the whole concept of, pre-visualizing a photograph. Even before you leave to take the photograph, you've already had the vision of what this photograph could do and what it can do in terms of impacting other people and telling a story. Now, here we are these are guys in, is this training camp or what's the story?
No, this is the Cape Cod Baseball League, and it's the league that a lot of the players go through before they go to the major leagues. Now, I was just talking about, going out to photograph something because you believe in it and then pitching it to an editor and getting it published. And that was kind of the case with this. So I'm from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I grew up there, and I always knew about the Cape Cod Baseball League. It was this summer ritual where, there's this league of teams. Geez, I don't know how many there are, maybe 20 teams or so all throughout Cape Cod, and they all play each other. And it's wonderful, warm summer nights. And it felt to me like Americana, got the red, white, and blue bunting out there and, the crack of the bat. It was just, this great summertime ritual. And I always thought it would be something great to photograph. So I pitched this to an editor that I've worked with over the years at the Players Tribune. The Players Tribune is this wonderful publication based in New York, where it's mostly athletes telling their own stories, behind the scenes with athletes.
Yeah.
So I pitched this to my editor. I said, how about if I go photograph this and, would you be interested in publishing this? So anyway, so he brought me on for, I think it was a 3 or 4 day shoot. Went to Cape Cod. It was great. I was able to stay with my family. And, it's interesting the way this works. It's kind of like anything. It becomes deeper. Like at first, it was like, okay, some baseball pictures. This will be fun, capturing this kind of Americana scene. And, then I learned, as I start doing research, that these players actually stay with families on the Cape.
Huh.
I thought that's interesting. So I found this wonderful woman, Barbara Ellsworth. She was 86 years old, and for 25 years, she had been taking in players. So she took in 4 players every summer, and they lived down in her basement. And she was such a character.
Amazing.
Oh, yeah. She had this encyclopedic knowledge of baseball. She'd go to every single game, and she would give these guys a hard time. She'd go walking out on the field at the end of the game. What were you thinking? That was a ground rule double, and she would just give them the hard times. But she also taught them manners. I would go back to the home and, where they all lived, and she would give them a hard time. What are you doing wearing your hat at the dinner table? Take your hat off. What are you doing leaning back in the chair?
Wow.
Yeah, so it was fun, just kind of documenting that and, just a little slice of life.
Well, here again is a perfect example of layering and frames within frames, because we have really, I'd say, at least 3 different images. You got the playing field in the background, the foreground with the guys, and then over to the left you have, the Cape Cod house. So you pulled all these elements together.
Yeah, and there are a couple other things going on here. One of them is the warm light on the players and the cool light in the background.
Oh, yeah.
And that's always a great thing if you can do that, just the warm and cool, the way they, kind of complement each other. And also, just photographing at this time of night is always a great chance to capture mood. Just the sun has gone down, but there's still some blue in the sky.
The blue
lights
hour.
Yeah, exactly. So it just captures a nice mood.
Fantastic. Let's look at one more, and then we'll take some questions. This is stunning. Where is this?
Yeah, this is in Paradise, California.
Oh, wow.
So this is a continuation of this personal project about the wildfires in California.
It all burnt down, right? The entire town.
The entire town burnt down. And that was, I think that was about a year and a half ago. And a lot of people lost their lives. I think 86 people lost their lives. And so I would just go up there and, try to document the story as it was unfolding. And this was a tribute to all the people that had lost their lives. Just again, it's a little bit of that warm light and the cool light.
Right.
And it is layered, the clouds are actually creating a second layer here. Mm-hmm. Again, it's that moody light, but something about the stillness of it and the quietness of it, I think, gives you the tone for the story of, the somber tone of, what has happened there.
And it looks like you got down fairly low. Were you kind of crouching down in this?
There was a little bit of a hill, and so I was down at the bottom of the hill, just kind of looking up.
Yeah, and the way you captured the sun hitting the crosses, and yet in the middle we have we're in silhouette. But then again on the right you've got the sun. It's just amazing how you timed that. That was incredible.
It's just those last few moments of sunlight, which are just magical.
They are.
So maybe when people go out and do their layering assignment, they'll think about going out at this time of day, if possible.
Exactly.
Because you always want something special in the photograph. Sometimes it's about light, sometimes it's about moment, sometimes it's about emotion. So it's like always looking for something special and continuing to work a photograph and not giving up. You see something and you're drawn to it and you photograph it. I always think it can get better. by spending time, and so many times it does. How can I make this better if I just wait longer, if I spend a little bit more time? So I call it working the situation. And so many times, if I give myself time, the image becomes stronger.
And not rushing it, giving yourself adequate time. And your point about, maybe not being with other people who can get impatient and say, hey, come on, you've been here for 10 minutes, let's get going. Or even if they don't say it, you feel kind of distracted by that. It's really important to have time by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one question that was coming to my mind, and somebody asked it, what was the photo that you won the Pulitzer for?
It was actually that photograph of the little boy that we saw earlier, the Iraqi boy. Now that was, it was a series of 20 images that won the Pulitzer. And it was following Salah from 2003 all the way through to the end of 2004. And I was, photographing him in the hospital. It was a matter of building trust with Salah and his dad, so that I could go in and photograph him and capture these difficult moments in the hospital while he had dozens of surgeries. And then as he left the hospital and he and his dad got an apartment in Oakland, they couldn't go back to Iraq because insurgents feared that they were American spies. So they settled in California, and I continued photographing his journey. He and his dad, and then they were granted asylum, and they were granted asylum for the mom and the rest of the family to come over from Iraq at the end of 2004. And so the writer and I, we traveled to Iraq, to the border of Iraq, and photographed the family coming back to America to be reunited with Salah and his dad. So I photographed that. And so it was a series of those 20 images that won the Pulitzer. It won in 2005. I do have the entire series on my website if anyone wants to see that. And my website is just my name, DeanneFitzmaurice.com.
There it is.
The Pulitzer can be a single image, or it can be up to 20 images. And as I said, this was awarded for a photo essay of these 20 images. It can be awarded, there are two categories in the Pulitzers. There is the news feature photography, and there's the News Photography Award, and there's the Feature Photography Award. And it was the Feature Photography Award that this won. Sometimes the Pulitzer can be won by a single individual, which this was the case with my Pulitzer, and sometimes it's awarded to a staff, like the staff of Reuters, or the photography staff of Associated Press, or the New York Times. So that's kind of
fantastic. We'll make sure we put the link up for your website. That's going to be on there, and your Instagram.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been really great to see you, Mark, and I love what you're doing about educating photographers and inspiring photographers, especially during this time. There's a quote that I love, and it is by Jim Richardson, and it is, "If you want to make better photographs, stand in front of more interesting stuff." And, as simple as that is, it's a beautiful quote. So I think combine that with finding the things that really matter to you and going out and photographing them, whatever it is. And that's where you'll make your best photography.